Hi, it's Geoff and Lauren here. We're back with another episode of Ask Geoff and Lauren, and we're here today to talk to you about practicing. And if you've got any questions, you can jump in and join us in the comment section below this video. We're always keen to kind of learn some new ideas, so keep the conversation going and join us in the comment section. But Lauren, we're going to start with Livio's question. Ciao, Geoff and Lauren. I have a question for you. How do you structure your practice routine in terms of time spent on the bass and the exercises you do in order to get the most from your practice time? Do you dedicate a lot of time to scales and technique, or maybe more to practicing the pieces? It would be nice to know how professional players practice so we can steal some suggestions. Thanks a lot, Livio. Shall I just jump in, Lauren, and give you some ideas about how I sort of balance things? It's funny, really, because I think that regardless of what level you are, everybody benefits from playing chromatic scales and scales, and I tend to practice shifting exercises and drills when I start. I'll post some links below to various ones that I've shared on my YouTube channel. But things like, I have just been on a holiday and I got back yesterday and I had a gig last night and I hadn't played the bass for at least a week and a half. And when I turned up at the gig, I just practiced chromatic scales up and down the bass just really slowly, just to kind of remind myself where all the notes are. And either that or kind of shifting drills and moving up and down the neck. I kind of find that centers myself. And I pretty much do some form of that every time I practice, particularly with the bow. It's really the best way to do it, in my opinion. I normally am practicing scales and arpeggios in some way. And it's usually they'll be related to whatever the piece is that I'm playing. So I like to really integrate everything that I'm doing. So if I'm practicing, I don't know, a piece in B major, it would be really useful to practice just B major triads, moving around the bass over, a couple of octaves in as many different ways. And I'll often do exercises like I'll play a B major arpeggio across 2 strings, and then I'll play it across 3 strings, and I'll move up one way and back down the other way, and then I'll try and reverse it and then compare the tuning of both ways through. So I'm kind of practicing it in several different ways and trying to keep the tuning as consistent as possible. So essentially the hard way will still sound as in tune as the easy route. So that I tend to do little things like exercises like that. I tend to do that certainly when I start playing the bass every time. I don't tend to practice as much technique stuff at the minute, but there certainly has been times that I'd also need to look at a specific technique issue, and then I'll work on the main thing that I'm working, which could be learning a piece or perhaps practicing something specific. So improvising. At the minute I'm working on walking bass in 5/4, so I might record myself. I find the more that experience that I get, the more useful recording myself is, and the more problems I hear that I can't identify when I'm playing live. And I know it's an obvious one, and we talk about it all the time, in the same way that using a mirror is really effective, but definitely recording yourself back. I just find that I learn so much about my playing that I never would have known if I hadn't really been doing these video lessons, because I'll listen back to a recording of myself and think, why do I always play an open string louder than a normal string, or whatever the random issue of the day is, So I mean, but you know what? I tend to sort of suggest the same things to my students. I guess the only thing that I would be doing is when I have newer students, I'd perhaps be focusing more on the technique side of things as well. I kind of probably be like scales, warming up, a bit of scales, a bit of technique, and then whatever this topic of the day is that, whether you're learning a study piece or what have you. But essentially it's pretty much the same kind of thing for all of us. There aren't really any secrets. It's just about getting in the practice room and getting it done. But how do you, so let me just read the question to you again, because Livio's question is quite specific. How do you structure your routine in terms of time spent on the bass with the exercises and getting the most from your time? How do you balance scales, technique, and practicing of pieces? It'd be interesting to hear how you go about it, Lauren.
Yeah, well, I think that there's two parts to this question. First, how do you sort of separate, at least what I'm hearing Livio is asking is, how do you separate the technical practice with all of your exercises, etudes, that kind of thing, and then the rest of your music? So that's one part of it. And then also making every minute count, essentially, because not everyone has a bunch of time to devote to practice. Very few people do, you know, so you want to make that time count. And so for me, I learned pretty early on that planning was everything, because if I just went in the room and said, I'm just going to practice, then I got very little done. You know, it turned out that if I was in there for, say, an hour, I would probably get like 15 good minutes, because it would just be spent trying to figure out what to work on. And so that's a big thing for me in making the time count, is planning. I usually plan the day before for the next day, and I'll sort of break down, you know, how much time I ideally have that next day, which could change on a whim because we're humans and things happen, but you can still sort of give a ballpark idea for, okay, I want to spend 10 minutes on my slow scale, and then I want to spend 30 minutes practicing the Bach, and then within that you can, you know, mark little things that you want to work on and how you want to go about it. That's a big thing for me, is not only saying I want to practice this piece, but, you know, making a little list of things and spots that I want to go over and how I want to go over them. So, you know, if I want to work on, say, the Bottesini, it's not just Bottesini 30 minutes. It's, okay, Bottesini from the first phrase, you know, the first 8 bars where I start playing, I want to focus on the vibrato on the first note. I want to get that exactly how I want to get it, whatever that means to you. Yeah. And then on this last bar of the phrase, I'm really hitting such and such note, pretty off key, that kind of thing.
But
you know?
that specific stuff, it's so interesting how you think your practice, and the stuff that really makes a difference, you'll identify that problem, and then you'll practice it, and then you'll come to the next session and you'll have forgotten it. And it's a bit like if you ever get into the practice of either doing audio recordings or writing down notes in your lessons when you're studying with people, and then you'll, you know, if you don't do that, and as a teacher you see it all the time, students come back the next week and they've completely forgotten something that you spent 20 minutes talking about, because you cover so much stuff. And it's the same in the practice room, that you'll go through and you'll be like, I couldn't play this yesterday, and I've completely, you know, I've just spent, you know, loads of time playing the stuff that I already know and not, you know, really fine tuning those areas. So it's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is that you're not going to be able to fix the intonation of one spot in one day, maybe. Yes. You know, very rarely have I worked on intonation in one spot and then it just be perfect for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just not how it works.
Yeah, that's so
true.
You
have to do a lot of things. Yeah, you have to do a lot of things over and over again, and that's where the line is sort of drawn of like, okay, am I just doing things over and over again with no result, or am I doing it and getting better slowly? And that's where recording is great, so you can see your progress. And also, if you plan your practice and you write in your journal for 3 months in a row, work on intonation in bar 5, then you're probably not going about it the right way, and you need to, you know, sort of
get advice, go to the teacher, work out what's going on.
And that's all. Yeah, and that all plays into using, you know, your time wisely and making sure every moment counts, because if you're practicing the same way, that takes time, you know, and if you're not doing it right, then you might as well just not do it. And so there's that, but then also what Livia was asking about, how to divide it up between technical exercises and scales and then pieces. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I think technical exercises are great. Scales, great. I play scales, shifting drills every single day. But it gets to a point where if you're working on these exercises for a specific technique, are you able to then apply them to your music? And that's something that you need to be thinking about, you know, because there are people that I've known and students that I've had that can play the exercises beautifully, but then when they have to use that same technique in a piece of music, they're not able to apply it. So that's another thing that you need to be thinking about. And in that case, what I would do is, say you're having trouble shifting or whatever, take a spot in your music and make that an exercise. And instead of practicing the shifting drill this week, maybe say, I'm going to work on this shift from here in this piece, and that's going to be my shifting drill for this week. That's something I do all the time. So
the pieces show you the way for the technical exercises. So if you're playing like like a Mozart piece, you might suddenly realize that your spiccato playing isn't particularly crisp, and you're not able to get that off the string stroke that you need.
Absolutely will.
And then it makes sense that you'll be practicing Mozart 39 and spiccato technique in the same session, because it all folds in, and then going back and recording yourself and really being able to focus in on what you need to do. It's not kind of a separate thing in a way. There's a lot of crossover between all of the aspects of your routine.
and also knowing, going off of that, knowing what you need to work on, but also what you don't need to be necessarily hammering in at this moment. Like you might be working on, let's just say, shifting drills every single day, but your shifting might be okay right now, so you don't need to spend 30 minutes doing that. Or your spiccato might be okay, but you're not playing anything that requires spiccato, so maybe instead, for the music that you're working on, you might need to work on another technique. That's another thing about just being smart about your practicing.
I'd say that there's nothing more motivating than being sent a load of music, or especially if you're when you get those gigs that are really important, and you especially if you're playing original music or something in a really I mean, Lauren did a concert recently where she was playing Bruckner, and I'm sure that if you got the music in advance, you would have been like, working through it, and that would have, shown you, it shows the way, and definitely, it's pretty motivating.
There's along the same lines. There's nothing more motivating than the first rehearsal.
That's true as well.
Wow.
Actually.
Okay. Okay. Now I know what I need to work on.
I think we all do. So listen, Livia, it's a great question. Thanks for bringing it up. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to hear, everyone at home, what your thoughts are about getting the most from your practice routine and balancing these different aspects. Jump in the comments and let us know, and we'll see you all next time.